What we're going to do now is we're going to go straight into our next panel discussion, and that is on new sourcing strategies, human resources answers. And I'm going to invite Mr. Fabian Knopf. That sounds very German.
It is very German.
Okay, it is very German. You are very German, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just kind of here.
Okay. So, Fabian, you're not presenting, are you?
Yes.
We're just doing the panel, right?
That's right.
You don't want to present?
No, I'm okay. I don't have any slides.
You don't need to present. Okay, so Fabian is going to be joined by a number of people. So, in no particular order, can I invite Vincent Fung, Principal Consultant, HRBS. Where are you, Vincent? You're right there. Thanks, Vincent. Nicolas Deschamps, Practice Manager, Consumer and Retail, MRIC.
Yes.
Thank you, Nicolas. Edwin K., CEO, Hong Kong Research Institute of Textile and Apparel. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, Thierry, Lambourg, HR and Security Director for Carrefour Global Sourcing. Thierry? Oh, you're there.
Very well.
Okay, very
Great.
good.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, Fabian, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We'll start off just a little bit of logistics. We have polls too, and we'll get to those after our quick discussion, which will be right after I quickly introduce just the panel. We've seen it here already with names and titles. We have Vincent right here, who's a specialist in remuneration. We have Ed as well, who's an academic in that field, so he'll supply us with lots of data. And then we have Nicolas, who's a specialist specifically for the recruiting, and then Thierry, who's an in-house HR manager who sees this part from the inside. And I'd like to start with Edwin just to give us, really to set the stage of what we're talking about here. We've heard a couple of things already this morning, but we do want to have a quick look about it, how that translates into the realm of HR.
Right. Good afternoon.
Very quickly.
I think what I'll do is I'm going to try to provide some context for our discussion, for our conversation this afternoon. I think these are the experts who will provide the content. And as academic, I like to set the stage, and some of these are somewhat broad slides, so take them for what they're worth. They're probably not very good for you, useful for you tomorrow in the office. But we've talked about this already. This is a chart of the growth of China, the GDP growth of China in the last, since the last century. A couple of things to note here that are very interesting is that this curve is very steep, and so some of the things that when people talk about the growth of China is slowing down, crisis. Well, when you have a $7 trillion, a single-digit percentage of $7 trillion is always bigger than double digits of a $2 trillion, especially when it's low double digits. So that's one thing to note. The other thing to note is this curve is unprecedented. There is no country of this scale that has ever grown at this rate in the history of mankind. Another comparison, as to what is happening at the same time, for example, in the United States. RMB, we have experts who've touched on it already. We have some fluctuations, 10 or 20 cents fluctuation compared to what has happened in the RMB in the last couple of years. It really is going to take a long time to get back to more historic rates that we're used to. We're talking about people. So here are some labor numbers in terms of minimum wages for some of the countries that are competing with China for high labor and labor-intensive types of products. China leads the pack, both in RMB and appreciation and in the appreciation of minimum wage. You can see this in comparison to other countries. It is worth noting that these are much more volatile numbers compared with this slide here, right? There was a dot-com bust, there was a 2008 crisis, sort of the curve kept going up as compared with these in which the smaller economies are more vulnerable to some of these fluctuations in the global economy. China sits in the middle of the pack of Asia right now in comparison to the rest of its neighbors. So not the cheapest, but certainly not the most expensive yet. And again, this is just to illustrate that other countries, especially Vietnam, which is the favorite, especially for textile and apparel as a substitute, is a little bit more volatile in terms of what is happening in China. We've talked a little bit, last speaker talked a little bit about domestic consumption. This is where things are happening in China, right? Consumption is going up, exports are going down, and so this is intentional on the part of the government, and also what is happening when you have more and more rich Chinese coming on board. So here's another slide. So this is a graph of where the world middle class is going to be, and you can see where the big wave is coming in from China and India. They will be major consumers, certainly within our lifetime. Three charts that are very interesting from McKinsey, which I thought were fun to look at. First of all, in 1985, everybody was poor in China. So 99% of the population was poor in China. The Chinese have done very well to reduce poverty, so it is now down to about a quarter of the population. So wealthier and consuming Chinese. More and more Chinese are living in the city. So whereas it was an agrarian country, more or less, in the 80s, it is now half of the population lives in big cities. And then finally, it's getting older. The one-child policy worked, so there are fewer and fewer people who are of the working age. So less younger people, more older people. And then this is an education chart of how educated is this part of the world. You can see by and large Africa and Bangladesh and countries like that in that part, sort of young, not as well educated. This part of the chart, older, well educated, mostly European countries. And then right in the middle, the big circle is China. Not very well educated, but more and more university graduates are coming on steam, and a huge population of them. And then finally, and I'll stop. So in terms of long slides, this is the GDP of the world for the last 2,000 years. Completely useless slide for use in the office tomorrow. But one thing of note is that if you look at the big picture, the GDP of the world was 2,000 years ago was dominated by two economies, India and China, right? And then in the 1900s, you see all the things that are happening. China closed up, America developed, Europe traditionally very wealthy, and then a couple of things happened in the last century. 2 world wars wiped out a lot of wealth in Europe, and then China opened up, and then so in 1970 you see the inflection point here of China opening up, and all of a sudden you see this wealth growing. You also see the same thing happening in India maybe 20 years later, as Indian economy is also connecting with the rest of the world. The moral of this slide, maybe for us, is that it is not so much China rising as China and India, or the world, going back to a historic norm. I'll leave you with that.
Thank you. Very well. And I want to pose the question directly to Thierry and ask him, what are the consequences of that for HR, for sourcing specifically? He's located in Shanghai, so he has a very PRC mainland perspective. But as I think we've seen, this is moving. We're diversifying, as we can also see, certainly by the figures. How do you see this?
We can see in this presentation and the presentation we had this morning that the sourcing area is moving faster and faster and changing faster and faster, and the competition is increasing highly. So, in terms of human resource, I would sort the people in 2 categories. HR people, we like to sort people in categories. I would say we have the pioneer, the people, the adventurer, the people who need to go outside to find new area, to find new territories, and to bring new added value for the companies. And we have more touch-based people who are staying on their original base, but they need to evolve too. For the pioneer, they need to really catch the culture, understand the culture, where they go. They need to really identify what are the strengths of the industry or the area they are settling, and they need to be the bridge between the culture of their company and the new offices they are going to build, or the new industry they are going to invest. For the touch-based people, we need to have people, even they are working on product they already know and manage, they need to be innovative. They need to be to find new products or to find new service they can propose. They need to be able to challenge themselves because we see that organizations are changing faster and faster. So they need to be able to challenge their own organization and to challenge themselves. And they need to be to have a strategic negotiation with suppliers. And in between both categories, there are two main skills that are very common. All need to be customer-oriented, and all need to be team working because the complexity of that organization that are changing need people who are able to work together more strongly.
Mm-hmm. Nicolas, you were nodding as you have I guess a similar perspective, but you see more companies. I would think. Do you have anything to add in terms of the exact skills that are necessary, the background as well, also of these people?
Yes, exactly. As we had new trends on the sourcing side, we have new trends also on the talent, and there is 5 specific new trends that's rising up, coming up. One is the social intelligence. So as we saw this morning, companies are less and less hierarchical. We are more and more networked. We use WeChat, we use a lot of applications like that to communicate, and end up we are losing a bit the contact with person. I mean, we are less and less face-to-face with people. We communicate more and more in remote area. So we need to have more social intelligence. Another skill that is very important and coming up is agile thinking. We need people to be more creative thinking, is what Thierry was explaining. Ability to innovate. So it comes another skills, which is entrepreneur mindset. Even though I talk to some big MNC, the first thing that they ask me is we need people who are entrepreneurs because they need to be innovative, they need to bring new idea. Then we have a fourth one, which is the cross-cultural skills. It's very funny. One day I was sending a profile to a client, and the first thing that it was a technical role, a product manager role, and the first thing that the client asked me, how many languages this person speaks. Communication is very important because, as we saw, we switched to a mass sourcing from China to different area in the region. So even though in the company the main language is English, they still want to have people who speak different language, even though they will not use on a daily basis, but to understand better to have better understanding and open-minded. And of course, the last one, which is leadership skills. Especially, I'm doing a lot on the medium management, and I think we have been through a lack of management skills on this level. So leadership skills is very, very important because we are in a complex situation. People need to deal with that and to have, to be able to manage the ambiguity.
Vincent, your perspective on remunerating those people, how do you incentivize them? What do you see, and where do these people come from? Where do you find them?
Actually, we observed that there is like a shift from competencies in the region, because I would describe it as like a red shift of sourcing activities from Hong Kong perspective. Because in the past, in like 1980s, the manufacturing started in like southern part of China, and gradually it moved to like inland of China, north part of China. Then later on, it goes to like Bangladesh, Cambodia, Sri Lanka. So it has a lot of implications of people competencies because we expect those sourcing experts or we expect those merchandisers to not just to be good at China's knowledge. If you're good at China, okay, you're good. But if you do not have some background information on like India, like Cambodia, whatever countries you name it, you're not too good. So the competency shift is that they shift from you need to be very specialized in one area. Now you need to be more generalized no matter geographical coverage, or if you can have a product type of generalization, that would be good. Because for a company, if you can source goods, if you have knowledge on like garment, apparel, but you can also source for footwear, then you are a talent for the company because you can play the forward, the midfield, and also the back. So the coach can place you anywhere, then you can play very well. And we also observed that there is a knowledge shift from Hong Kong. Like in the past, most of the technical jobs are located in Hong Kong. And now, just in these 3 years, we observed that From our database, we see from 2010, the technical job composition in Hong Kong has decreased from 66% of Asia Pacific now only to 45%, which means that those multinational sourcing companies have decentralized their product integrity, their web processing, fitting and pattern to other locations. So what would be the destination? China is one of them. It has increased from 9% to 24%, and also India would be one of them. If the manufacturing, like the Mumbai, Delhi industrial corridor can be built up successfully, then this trend will continue, we expect.
Okay. What does this decentralization mean for just sourcing operations in general? If we're not, it seems there's less linearity and just a lot more complexity, more ends that need to be tied together. How is that, Thierry? At a very, very large, certainly sourcer and predominantly retailer, how do you tackle this in Asia?
What is important is to let the autonomy to the different kind of organization to be able to adapt themselves to their own environment, and to have the adaptability, the agility internally to change very quickly.
Right.
And you can do that because the management allow that change quite quickly, and because people are able to propose or to implement that changes.
Right. Are those processes supported by IT much? How has IT helped, maybe, or maybe not helped yet, or what are
very good question.
Opportunities?
It should be.
It should be, right? Okay.
It should be, definitely. I'm not sure in our case IT is the most, advanced strengths we could have. So it's, let's say, a development plan.
Mm-hmm. Right. Nicolas, you want to comment on that?
Now, after it's important to know is how to find those talents, and obviously as a recruiter, I would like to have it, but I don't have a factory, so
right.
I cannot produce those talents. And is what I trust, and from a recruiter point of view, is to become more and more specialized and become a master of market.
Right.
So I think it's very important to be very specialized and focused.
Right. Just sort of 2 points, observations. So one, in the research that we've been doing about decision making, it's not that most multinationals make wrong decisions. Most of the time, it's just that they make the right decision too late.
At the wrong time.
Yeah. So that was one. So it's the velocity of decision making, especially when you're dispersed across different time zones and in different locations. So that's, I think, is a big challenge. The other thing that I hear a lot of when we talk about people and talent now, the phrase I keep hearing is that we hire for what we can't train. So it's intangible things like taste level, EQ and IQ, and the more technical skills on the engineering part of work seems to be not as interesting or not as important, especially to MNCs. Right? I don't know if that's your experience.
It's one of the negative aspects of benchmarking. When you do mainly benchmarking, you never have the step in advance to the other. You always take the right decision, but after all the others.
So is this change in HR that you see, and certainly so different skill sets, and actually IT processes need to be built, which are not, or which are at a low level for now. Is management aware of that? Is that discussion material in boardrooms? Is that something, because HR should always be, the chief HR managers have moved up into the boardroom. They've become a lot more important in corporate governance. But is it something that receives the necessary attention yet, or is it?
I think it is, but within many stakes or challenge we have, you need to make choice. So yes, it is.
Right. Vincent, you had something.
Yeah, agree. Actually, I agree with what Edwin said. Usually, company can hire those who are trainable, so they can train them up. And what point I want to bring here is that we observed that some of the companies, actually a lot of companies, they not just focus on trainable people, but they need to have the trainer for the trainer locally. So that means that, for example, we conduct a survey for Bangladesh. The composition of foreigner for managerial grade or above is constitute around 17.8%. That means among the buying office or sourcing office, they have 17.8% who are foreigners. These are the people who can bring company's culture, can bring those technical skills, and also the mindset or whatever to bring them to international standard, to teach them how to fly. So I think that is quite important to not just to have the trainable people, but also the right trainer and the right training program for them.
And what we have also, I mean, more and more clients ask us, okay, let's look at this talent, but what we want to do is, what is his capacity to become? So they hire people to become the next leader in 2 or 3 years. So they try to hire in advance more and more. So it's not only about training, it's also the capacity that you have and the ability to become a leader or a talent.
And we were talking about, so technical talent is not being sourced as much from Hong Kong. Where does it come from then? It's moving south, certainly supply chains have moved south. Is there more recruiting in these markets then? What are great recruiting grounds? Where has that moved? Where does the talent come from?
Yes. Interestingly, I'm based in Hong Kong. I've been here so many years. And I think last year, about on 15 projects that I've been working on, maybe I did 2 placements or 3 placements in Hong Kong. Everything was out of Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm.
More and more Southeast Asia. We talk about it, Bangladesh, India, Indonesia. And where also you have more and more talent, local people in Indonesia, Vietnam also, and Cambodia. So yes, I've been moving a lot.
Is that, well, please?
Yeah. Actually, for those people, usually they move from more like developed market, like in 1980s, 1990s. The technical skill focus in like Hong Kong, maybe in Taiwan as well. And after China opened up, those Taiwanese maybe go to China South especially. And now for Bangladesh, we see from our database, a lot of them are from like India, from Philippines, and maybe from Taiwan. So that is our observation. People moving around, if locally they do no longer have those garment manufacturing jobs, they need to move. This is the push factor for them to go to somewhere else to look for a job that's suitable for them, that they can do well.
For key talents, we are recruiting more and more in a regional, even in a world base. We can recruit in England to move in Shanghai and Hong Kong, or someone moving from Vietnam and coming to Shanghai. That's happened more and more frequently. They are the pioneers I was speaking about.
Right. What I can't help wondering, and this may deviate a little bit, is the panel is made up entirely of males. We look around the room, I would say there's about maybe 70 to 30 distribution here. Is that the traditional sourcing structure? Is that because, or is that going to change maybe as well when we move also into other cultures, into other nationalities, or what's the reason for that? If I may be so blunt. Please.
If you do an MBA and get an education and you're about 30 years old, and I see some of you young people in the audience, and you have a useful working life of, say, 30 years, you only have 6,000 working days between here and senility. So women have a disadvantage there, right? You have to have children, you have to rear a family. It's very tough. So there, in terms of male, female, the male always seems to have the advantage of having more available days in their useful life in which they can work on. I think it is changing. It is changing, but it's tough. You know,
right.
I feel for. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'll stop making strange remarks now.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, we get the raw data and we get the jokes from an academic and the same person. That's very good. Vincent, you were going to say?
And also I think it's all more about the job nature. Maybe for merchandisers, QA, they need to travel around different regions. Yeah. It makes some difficulties for women who have a family, more family oriented. But I do think that it is an advantage if sourcing industry can attract more female to join. Just like currently, Hong Kong Exchange is encouraging more female directors in their board. And a lot of companies actually have a female, because they have their advantage. I don't want to talk too much about the difference between male and female, but it certainly will help on to coming up the right mix for like decision making, the work harmony, and so on.
Right.
Yes, I think it's changing because, for example, for a profile for a quality person, before was a person very operational going on plant doing audit, so maybe it was less women doing that. But after, it really depends on the job. On product development, there is a lot of women doing that. And nowadays, role and like quality person becoming more and more strategical, having a regional board, view. So there is women, of course, doing it. So I think it's a
After you can have question of
sensitive
culture.
topic. Yes, sorry.
You can have question of culture and organization too. If I screen my organization at the board level, we have 10 people, only one woman.
Right.
But when you arrive just the level below and all the level below, it's 50-50.
That's right.
And all the people from the board nearly are coming from France or Europe. So it's too a question of culture, and I think in Asia, even if you check Carrefour retail, the number of store directors that are women are very, very important in China regarding what we can observe all over the world in our company.
Okay. I'd like to just draw a quick conclusion, and you guys can comment if I get anything wrong. I think what in terms of skills, what is required, what came out of this panel here is that a lot more flexibility that is required from candidates and certainly sourcing staff, agility in the work. There needs to be a global view of the market and a general understanding as well of what the customer wants, right? So these are not just product specifications, but also understanding how does the customer look at this product and whether or not this is interesting and attractive to them to turn that into revenue. There's more of a focus on the corporate culture, which then is a requirement for organizations to adjust as well. HR, as I said earlier, it's becoming certainly in China, it's the number one. When the chambers of commerce ask, what do you see the biggest threat to your business? It's HR. It's maintenance. It's training. It's recruiting. And when you then drill it down and say, okay, so we need these kind of people, and that's not going to get any easier. So you need internationally oriented people. You need people who can integrate in such teams, who can work virtual teams certainly as well. You can't rely on having in-person meetings every week or every month. You have to be able for people to rely on video conferencing, on phones, on emails, on virtual means. And so the organizations have to adapt to that and provide the infrastructure. Certainly, also, building up IT processes is certainly more of a midterm, midterm goal. But there needs to be a start at some point, certainly, and it really needs to be a part of a corporate strategy and the culture. If there are no comments from here, I would like to do a poll. I have two, but we'll start with one. We have that right there. So how should companies' HR development adapt to the change? There's three options here: develop and train existing staff, hire staff with different but complementary skills, or adapt work processes. There you go. Right, so we're clearly in developing and training staff. Sorry, Nicolas, for that, I suppose, as a recruiter. And then, adapting and work processes the least favorite one. Nicolas, do you maybe want to comment on that? I mean, as a recruiter, certainly that means less work for you.
For me, the blue is the most important.
Right, exactly. that's still second in line then.
But I mean, it's hard to say what is the most important. I mean, I think it's a mix of.
Right.
If today a company wants to succeed, they have to mix with that.
Right.
They need to.
Definitely, I mean the combination is key. You do with the people who are already in company, loyal, engaged, but you need to help them, or you must to help them to move on to acquire new skills and to develop themselves in order to accompany the future development of the company.
It's amazing how quickly skills gets obsolete in this environment. Right?
And I guess
when you want to make a change or a shift, more often it's much more efficient to get new skills, new role model, people who bring something new that help very shift much more quickly.
I suppose that's the least the inertia for adapting work processes is a lot higher than for getting a trainer in, or training new people, or just acquiring new skills through new people. Fair enough. Okay. Are there any comments from the audience on this, maybe? Not yet. Fair enough. We can do another poll then. Nope. This one.
We don't want to look at that again.
Right. So does your sourcing staff culturally identify with the consumers that it sources for? Surprises about that?
Well, it's hard, right? Why are we manufacturing this part of the world? Because you have cheap labor.
Right.
And so by definition, you make in the east and you ship to the west. Right. So today that your manufacturers and your factory workers live and understand the same way as your consumers, you have lost your price advantage.
Right. So as prices go up, certainly we've talked about the end of cheap China for years now. This should change then, because there's more focus on product features, product quality, all of that, and then so this should change. You would say then, if you had to make a forecast.
I mean, globalization has meant in the last 40 years that the developing world is disappearing. That is why China is getting more expensive.
Right.
So we are much closer. The first world and the third world are getting closer. But that is a huge HR training opportunity.
Right. Is this something that HR departments think about?
How they identify to the...
Yeah, do they think, okay, so this quality manager I'm going to hire, they will understand what my consumers want?
Yeah, definitely yes. Because we can observe that when we train people internally to give them insight about what our consumers in Europe want, the investment we need to do for that is huge. And even we invest a lot, we never reach exactly because the difference of culture, they are not near the stores, near the customers, they don't have many information day to day. So when we hire someone, definitely we go through what he already understood about our consumers or customers.
Right.
I officially went to the most beautiful factory I've ever seen in China last week, in Pudong, Shanghai, by the way. Beautiful. And I asked the sewing workers, where are you trained? And they all trained in Paris. It's the repair factory for Louis Vuitton. Chinese workers go to Paris to learn how to sew the Louis. So I mean, if you have that type of financial resources and investment, I think you can do.
I was just thinking a sewing factory in Shanghai. All right, okay.
Program,
This was last week.
Yeah.
we have a big program this year to give insight to our merchandiser about our customers, to send them in stores in Shanghai. But stores in Shanghai are not the same as stores in Paris. So we do half of the way, but still.
I tell you, the other side is also true, though. I took a class of MBA students. I'm sorry I missed Jason at Luntai this morning, because we took a group of MBA students and we lived in Jason's factory last week. Because the West has also have to figure out how to communicate with the East, right? When you say something, how do you say it in a way it's intelligent to people you're talking to, right? It's a two-way street.
Okay. With that, I would like to open it up to Q&A. If there are any questions, please, yes, right here, Olivier. Do we have a mic? Very good.
Yeah, the first question is for Edwin. Do we still today in a relationship with the supplier, which is mainly a transactional mode that we have with the supplier? In case we are moving that relationship with the supplier, what are the consequences in terms of required competencies? And can we really, on a sustainable way, keep these competencies if we continue to evaluate our sourcing guys just on purchasing price evolution?
Right. Yeah, great question. The behavior of buyers will not change unless the metrics of buyers will change. So that's a huge philosophical discussion we can have all day, but it's like every mouse believes that it's great if the cat has a bell, right? Who's going to do it? One, but then two, I think the whole transactional behavior of buyers are breaking down. 10 years ago, there are still buyers who go into the great unknown and try to discover new sources of manufacturing and new factories that nobody's ever found before. I think all that is done. The Luntais and the crystals and all those worlds are not going to be transactional relationships. These have to be long-term relationships in which you discuss and program out what you're going to manufacture, and that's how you get sustainable practices, transparency in supply chain, quality assurance, and that's how you can make sure that you have stable financing in your supply chain anyway. So the challenge is, how do we develop these types of relationships so that they are much more stable? The other thing that people haven't noticed, or maybe they have, I just discovered it, that the power relationship has also changed. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, factories go to buyer and say, please give me some orders. Nowadays, if you're a good manufacturer, there are people who are trying to get into your factory and ask you for some production capacity in your place because they know that you're good. I think we need to change also. So both parties have to change their behavior in recognition of this new reality. I don't know if that answers your question.
Richard Thomas from M&S. I've been living in Hong Kong for 13 of the last 16 years, and I've noticed an ever-increasing trend of young people in Hong Kong and China spending a shorter and shorter amount of time in a job and jumping around because there's so many opportunities, which is great because there's opportunities, but it does mean that often the experience level is quite patchy, and often there is, I'm not generalizing for everybody, but often there's a reluctance to take on a challenge when there's another job around the corner. Do you think that situation will continue going forward?
Yeah. You're the headhunter.
Yes. I think it's because also the market was very dynamic. Things are getting a bit more stabilized. So I think it will change a bit, and the level of management is increasing. There is still a lot of young people, definitely, but I think the skills are really increasing. So the market is getting more and more less good than before, definitely. So more challenging. So I think people will probably less jump, getting more stabilized. And at MRIC, we do every year we do a survey, And it's interesting because what we ask to people, what are you going to change job this year? Are you going to find a new opportunity? And then we ask why. And salary is not also the first things coming. People are looking a lot about career development, clear career paths, especially in China. I mean, companies have been growing drastic during the last 10 years, 20 years. And now people are really caring about that. And there is also one more thing that I would like to add is people are also interested by company culture and looking more and more for that, like flexible hours or different things like that. So I think it's interesting to see the new skills, but also to understand the new needs of the people.
I think young people have to be nurtured. They have to be loved. You have to parent them. It's not just paying a salary at the end of the month. I was in the Google's office in Shanghai. They have a pool table. They have massage chairs, yoga classes. In one of the most expensive pieces of real estate in Shanghai, I have to add. And I asked them, why do you do all this? They said, well, because if we don't, our talents get poached. On the other hand, I have to say too, last year I was visiting Alibaba. And the average tenure there is over 5 years. And I was saying, well, what's the secret? And they say they just love it there. They love the culture. They like the work environment. They enjoy all the intangibles. They can make more money somewhere else, but it's very sticky, that relationship, I find.
I think we have time for one more question. Just one. Fair enough. Then we'll wrap it up. Thank you very much to the panel.